Police officers, what's the dumbest thing you've ever seen a criminal do or say? Woman is waiting for her DUI trial in the courtroom. The lawyers and judge are milling around and getting their paperwork in order. Trial starts in 10 to 15 minutes. The prosecuting attorney asks her if she wants to take the plea deal one last time. She refuses and goes on about how this is unconstitutional and the police and courts are corrupt and how is she going to take her kid to school blah blah blah. She is starting to cause a bit of scene, yelling, acting like a child, just being generally annoying. Someone in the room gets a whiff of alcohol. She is out on bond, so she can basically be given a PBT at any time for any reason. Judge orders one on her. She registers a 0.226 in court. This woman who is on trial for DUI had the audacity to drive to court drunk and then moan and groan about how she isn't being treated fairly and we're all corrupt and this is unconstitutional. Not only that, but it explicitly states in your bond conditions that you cannot consume alcohol. So I cuff her and bring her to the jail. She's still running her mouth during the walkover. I had nothing to say. I had absolutely zero sympathy for her. I could barely hold in my laughter on the walkover to the jail. All the people from To Catch a Predator. NBC has online transcripts, and they still come up with the stupidest excuses. Chris Hansen, sir, what else could you mean by asking the girl if she was a virgin and then telling her you wanted to penetrate her anally? Predator, I'm just here to watch football man, she told me she was 18. Hansen, in the transcripts you clearly say she's 13, you could get in trouble for this and ask her not to tell anyone. DUI trial. Defendant chooses to represent herself. She tries to introduce evidence during the trial, but is quickly blocked by the prosecution. The judge, maybe taking pity on the flaming train wreck that was this woman's defense, asks to see the evidence. It was a receipt from the bar she left before I stopped her that showed that she purchased 2 large margaritas. Her whole defense was, I couldn't have been drunk after only 2 margaritas. She was found guilty. My initial reason for stopping her was that she drove down an embankment on the side of the road to get to a McDonald's drive-thru. Gideon v. Wainwright was the Supreme Court case that introduced the right to an attorney. The gist of it is that the courts agree that the average Joe is not very good at defending themselves in court. These are my pants, but those are not my pockets. Can't make this shit up. I was so new at the time I didn't have a witty response. I just chuckled and kept searching him. I think what he meant to say everything in his pockets, cigarettes, ID, lighter, keys, were all his, but the baggie of meth was not, but who am I to make assumptions? The man said they weren't his pockets, so they weren't his pockets lol. In a city near to me a guy murdered a woman, put her body in a large garment bag, and left her in a vacant lot. Unfortunately for him, he forgot to take the tags with his name and address off the bag from a recent flight. A would-be bank robber wrote his hold-up note and put it into his wallet. He got rattled at the bank, and accidentally left his driver's license on the counter when he handed the note to a teller. A third crook just took on more than he could handle, and apparently didn't watch the time. He had a long history of grand theft auto, and was hospitalized after being badly beaten in the parking lot of a sports area after a lacrosse game. The guy swore up and down that he had no idea why anyone would assault him there. Dad's a detective. Had a murder case where a dog walker found a severed head in a park. Over the rest of the morning they found a full set of chopped up body parts around that park. A trail of blood led from each part, and they followed them all the way back to a nearby house, in through the door and up the stairs to a room covered in blood with a guy asleep in a bed. Turns out this guy had got drunk with a friend, had an argument, killed him, chopped him up and hid his body parts in the park before passing out back at the house. Police caught him literally red-handed. Apparently he was really confused how they got him so quickly. I had a friend back in the day that earned the name DUI Don because he was driving a girl home after some partying one night, she was shit-faced and he was only high as balls. Gets pulled over, could easily say that he's sober, happy to blow into the tube, etc., and get out of it. First thing he says to the cop is I'm going to level with you, I'm really high. Spent that night in jail. The cherry on this, and the reason I know the full details of it all, is because the girl with him was 17 and, bonus, homeless. When she didn't have anywhere else to go she gave them my address, an 18-year-old living alone, and I got to become her temporary legal guardian. Awesome night. Thanks DUI Don. Edit. Should have added /s to that final thank you and awesome night. So my personal favorite was when a bloke on a motorbike swerved in front of our squad car and crashed. We hopped out, picked the bike up off him, it was pinning his leg, and asked, "You alright mate?" To which he replied, "Of course I'm alright, what do you mean?" "Well you just fell off your bike mate." "No I didn't." He just kept insisting that there was no way he could have crashed, and it must have been someone else. Edit: for those concerned, it was a head injury. He did blow a .17 when tested, so we chalked it up to that. Not a police officer but a witness to a crime who had to give evidence in court. Basically witnessed a girl crashing her car and barrel rolling it into a tree. She was clearly drunk. The fireman arrived after 10 minutes, her car had leaked petrol everywhere, then her husband shows up on foot and tries to calm her down, followed by her mother in a car and the police. She tried to claim that she wasn't the one driving, even though no one else had been in the car. In court a year later, she said her mother had been driving, the one who showed up in her own car 10 minutes after the crash. She also punched an officer in the face and was pepper sprayed, but that's a whole other story. Needless to say, she was found guilty. Retired cop here. Boy, do I have stories. One dumbass move a guy did was he steals some poor girl's car. It was her first car, she worked full-time, was a sweet little thing, and we felt so bad, she was crushed. Also in the car for some reason was her cell phone. So a colleague who has the gift of talking shit really well calls the number. Dude answers. It goes a little something like this. Cop: motherfucker, you stole my girlfriend's car. Bad guy: bitch, I will fuck you up then fuck your bitch. Cop: ring it, motherfucker. No cops, no friends, me and you, I'm at the Chevron on Main Street and 5th. Pussy, I'm calling your bitch ass out. Bad guy: bitch, I'm on my way. Click. Me: no fucking way he's coming. Dude rounded the corner and pulls into the gas station. We hid our cars behind it, and then when he parked we boxed him in. He had a gun too. Fucking idiot. On probation, had a loaded gun. Came to us. Edit: a new story by popular demand. A few questions. Yes, he showed up in the stolen car with a friggin' shaved key in the ignition he used to steal it. Because people liked it so much, I talked to the original cop who has the gift of talking shit. He said a few months later in court the guy claimed the gun was not his, as we found it under the driver's seat. He said it must be hers. So fucked up. But the jury didn't buy it. We saw him shoving something from his waist under his seat when he saw us. Also, yes, the look on his face was classic. It went from "I'm gonna kill this dude" to the look a prey animal gets when it knows it's fucked. He was killed a few years later in a chase in another stolen car. Was ejected. DOA. New story. Okay, I will give you all another. This one was kinda circumstance that involved me, lol. So working one busy Saturday night. There was a huge brawl with about 20 brothers in front of a club. You know, affliction shirts, tap out shirts and Monster Energy hats with flat bills galore, lol. So we get there and start grabbing dudes, searching real quick, then stuffing M in the nearest car, then jumping back into the fray because we were fighting with them too. So it all dies down and immediately we get a call, I forget what it was, but we gotta go, lights and sirens to it. I run to my car, nobody in it. Sweet, I get to go. So I jump in my car and I'm hauling ass, lights and siren to this new call for a few minutes, apexing turns, it's 2 a.m. and foggy, not really anyone on the roads. Remember that? 2 a.m. and foggy. So I'm rolling down this street in the fog with my lights and siren, and I see an object with a hoodie on its head slowly slide up behind me in my rear view. The jail's that way, where you taking me? I was going fairly fast on a straightaway and I nearly fucking stacked it up into a pole when I was scared shitless. I jerked the wheel and a little pee came out, I do admit. I pulled over and had to pace a few minutes outside the car to calm down. So the guy was stuffed into my car by some other officer, and because he was drunk he just laid down on the floorboard, put his hoodie on and passed out. I woke him up by yanking and banking and slamming him into the doors of the car, lol. I took him back to the club and no officer claimed him. So I just took the dude home and we laughed about it the whole way. I told him I totally peed. That's too perfect. Edit. Lamau: someone definitely messed up and gave gold to the wrong person, smiley face, and 3,000 upvote? Who are you people? Edit 2. I come home from work to gold x2 and almost 5,000 upvotes. What the holy hell is wrong with you people? I love you all. Not a cop but rode along frequently as part of a training program. The dumbest thing I saw someone do involved one of those dog crates that you can carry, like for a small dog such as a chihuahua. This woman was having a dispute with some people who had their dog in one of those carry kennels sitting on the ground. There were 3 officers at the scene. The woman was given a ticket and tossed it on the ground. She was told, pick that up or you will be arrested for littering. When she picked it up she kicked the dog kennel hard enough to make it barrel roll. She was immediately and aggressively taken into custody and charged with animal cruelty. Edit. Since this gained some popularity, Let's hate this woman because she was the most annoying person I have ever interacted with. She called 911 to say that there were people she didn't know squatting in her garage apartment and they had a knife. We got there and the squatters had tons of regular people belongings that did not match the profile of squatters. Additionally, all of their belongings were strewn along the ground outside in the alleyway. They had texts proving that they had been renting from her and they said that they were 2 days late on rent. She went crazy and threw all of their stuff outside. The knife that they supposedly had was one of their steak knives that had come out of a shelf that she dumped in the alley. She had also allegedly shoved one of them. By the time we had sorted this all out, the woman had vanished. The officer told them to go ahead and put their stuff back inside and that she'd have to evict them. At this point they didn't want to press any charges, so we just left to drive around and told them to call back if they had more problems. They called back within 10 minutes, she'd come back and shoved one of them, throwing another temper tantrum. The ticket she got was for assault by contact, and the rest is history. Tossed the ticket on the ground, kicked their dog, and got taken to jail. The best part was that the whole ride to jail she was continuing her tantrum, asking how she was going to jail when she called the police and she didn't do anything wrong. No matter how many times she said that she didn't do anything wrong or that she shouldn't go to jail though, that's exactly where she ended up. Copied mine from a previous similar thread. In law enforcement but not a regular cop. Middle of search warrant looking for a bloke. Lots of drug convictions in the past. Found a still burning blunt in the ashtray in the living room. But no sign of the guy in the house. I am 99% sure he is in the roof cavity. I announced to my partner I think he is up there, should we look? Suddenly the ceiling starts talking. Hear the softest no. He, shit. Can they hear me? Nah. It's all good. So my partner said nah man. I didn't hear that guy say we shouldn't look up there. Ceiling replies with sweet, I knew they wouldn't find me. Needless to say we looked and pulled a very stoned guy out from under the insulation bats, side note. They make you itchy AF so be careful choosing your hiding spots when you're stoned. There are so many to choose from, but one sticks out. Dude decides that his dildo no longer is doing the trick by itself so he uses his creative liberty to construct an apparatus to enhance his experience. He takes his once boring old dildo and bolts it in an upright position on the top of his nightstand to create the Megatron of sex toys. Unfortunately for him, and us, he found himself unable to disengage from his new toy. Evidently, the once pleasurable toy was now a torture device because his screams of agony were alarming/loud enough to get the attention of his neighbor, who called 911. After 10 minutes of unsuccessful attempts by police and EMS to remove homeboy from his device, we ultimately had to unbolt the toy from the nightstand and transport him to the hospital with the toy still intact. Friend who is an officer told me this one a little bit ago. He was driving near where a known car thief lived, so he stops by. SUV in the driveway with no tags. Walks up, runs the VIN, stolen. Now the property had a house on it, and then out back, a small mother-in-law suite where said thief lived. Officer walks out back, knocks, and then hears a car door. Officer starts running, engine starts, and yup, thief is driving away in the stolen SUV. Officer knows where he ditches stolen cars at, so has an officer stake out that area. Sure enough 2 hours later the SUV rolls up with a Jeep following it. SUV driver wipes down the dash, wipes down the outside door handle and gets in the Jeep. Officer pulls them over and arrests them both. Why both? The Jeep is stolen. Officer runs her license, sent another officer to her address and guess what? She had a stolen car at her place. 3 stolen cars recovered, 2 people in jail, all because one officer decided to stop by a thief's last address. I'm not a police officer but I called the cops on my roommate in college because she tried to attack me and she wouldn't cooperate with the cops so she got cuffed and was screaming about how she was gonna beat my ass. They were like, yeah? You were gonna beat her ass? And she was agreeing lamau. In court later the judge asked her so you think it's okay to beat someone's ass if they turn your TV off when you're not there? And she nodded and said yes I do and the judge just deep sighed. My Bill is a cop in a small town. Pulled a car over one night, recognized the kid. Smelled weed inside the car, and said give me the weed and I won't search your car, won't give you a ticket, and you can be on your way. Kid fights him, says he doesn't know what that smell is, there's no weed, and how can I trust that you won't take me to the station if I give it to you? Bill promises again that if he hands him the weed, he will let him go, no questions asked. Kid keeps being a moron. Bill searches the car, and finds many more drugs hidden all over, as well as weed. Bill says alright, let's go to the station. Kid gets upset and says you said you weren't going to do this. See, I couldn't trust you. I groan and laugh every time I think of that. What a dummy. So can I see your driver's license? I don't have one. Then why were you driving? I wasn't, I was traveling. I remember seeing this one. There's hundreds of videos of this on the internet. There's a lot of sovereign citizens, they're people so stupid they think they're smart, kind of like anti-vaxxers, and they all say this same idiotic thing, I'm not driving, I'm traveling, with this smug-ass grin, like those are the magic words to say to police that makes it okay to drive without a license or registration. My shop sells beer and wine, we card everyone. I almost broke out laughing when this guy handed me this fake SID that said private citizen of the land. The kicker was that he then tried to use his voter registration card as ID, which we don't accept anyway. For those not aware, sovereign citizens argue they aren't citizens of the United States. But this guy is a registered voter for our state. I was police at the time. In the middle of the night my partner and I found a car in a cemetery. Stolen cars were dumped there regularly. The car had its windows down and it had only recently been left there. It was still warm to touch. It didn't flag up as stolen, and through the window I could see a meth pipe in plain view. That gives us the ability to search the car. Inside we find a bunch of meth pipes, 3.5 grams of meth, a small amount of cannabis and a handgun. There was also a tablet/phone that was unlocked, and while we were searching the car the tablet kept on receiving messages from people trying to score meth. I had a quick look through the phone, and was able to figure out that the owner of the car had come out from the city, I worked rurally at the time, to make a score from one of the local gangs. But the gang didn't want her turning up, so arranged to meet her at the cemetery and conduct business somewhere else. I leave a business card under the wipers, not my card but the station's, and on the back I wrote that she, the owner of the car, should come down to the station if she wants to get her stuff back. And sure enough she did. At 9 the next morning, methed out, looking for her drugs and gun. Edit. Layout and clarity. Dispatcher. Had a guy call in and tell us that he's currently violating the protective order by being with his ex who is pregnant by him. Wants us to call the judge and get it dismissed so they can go inside the restaurant and eat. Officer is standing next to my partner who answered the call and asks the guys where he is so we can send the judge to him. Guy hangs up. Often because of abuse. Lots of victims of domestic abuse go back to their abusers. And drugs. I lived in a house for about 36 hours, because 30 hours in she asked me to keep a lookout for cops while the boyfriend she had a restraining order against came over and shot up with her. 6 hours and one pulling a knife later, I had my bags outside the train station out of there. A buddy of mine was a campus PD officer back in college. I was convinced I could beat the sobriety test after a 6-pack, so I had him take me through it. I walked the line, touched my nose and hopped on one foot. Then he asked me to say the alphabet backwards. I told him I couldn't do that sober. He said that sentence is probable cause for a blood test. That's how I learned that they aren't just testing your motor skills. Not my story, but my police officer friends. He had gone in to arrest someone for dealing drugs, he was in full uniform, whilst someone else had already been in there undercover. The drug dealer looks at the undercover police officer and says, "You're undercover." "Yes." "Well done." He looks at my uniformed friend and says, "You're undercover too." He was not. Then he looks at someone else, not a police officer, and says, "And you?" Guy responds with, "How am I an undercover police officer? I just bought drugs off of you." And that's how they made an unexpected arrest at that raid. So we are partying at one of our friends' place, and cops stop by to check what's with all the commotion. I know that because they told me that there weren't any complaints or anything, so I am dealing with the cops, when my friend, who is high AF, decides to join in. He starts speaking in our native tongue, which the cops don't understand. Anyhow, one of the cops raises his right hand and waves 3 fingers in front of my friend's face, asking him how many fingers are these? To which my friend replies, still in our native language, "Thankfully, why do you drink so much that you are even unable to count your own fingers, sir?" Second-hand story, as I was the victim of burglary, but heard this from the police officer. I saw the guy breaking into my place on a security camera and called them. They managed to arrest the guy while he was still inside packing up my stuff. He was pretty cocky to the police, as that he thought that as he hadn't actually left with his bag of swag, my stuff, that he hadn't committed a crime yet, all he did was broke a window. Not a police officer, but my father was a 911 dispatch operator. My dad was working one night and he gets a call from a man who is obviously drunk. "Dad, 911, what is your emergency?" "Drunk, yeah, I think I just heard a red car crash." "Dad, you heard a red car crash?" "Drunk, yeah. Dad, okay, Police are on their way. Click. My dad finds out later that this dude was driving drunk and crashed his car not far from his house. Guy decides to get out of his car, stumble home, and dial 911 to report the fact that he heard a car crash. In his drunken mind, he figured he'd report the crash as someone who heard it and he'd get off, somehow. But he had to specify the color, because apparently a red car crashing sounds different than a blue car crashing. There was a home invasion here, Colorado, where the invaders weren't happy with the amount they got. They told the homeowner that they were coming back the next night and that he should have $500 ready for them. I can just hear the invaders being carted off saying, "I thought I said, no cops. I'm the guy that did something stupid. I was speeding while smoking a cigarette. Got pulled over. Had no ashtray in my car, but didn't want to be smoking when the officer came to my window. So I flicked it out my window. Right in front of him. He actually let me pick it up. Littering is a $1,000 fine. I'm not a smart man. Knack, but my ex is, and he told me once that they got a call because a gas station just got robbed by a guy in a ski mask with a gun. Witnesses say that he ran away but got into a car about a block away and drives off. Ex is driving down the side street and sees a guy driving the opposite direction with a ski mask on. Flips around and lights him up. Guy pulls over. Ex gets him out of the car and puts handcuffs on him and checks the car, and lo and behold, there's the cash and cigarettes and the beer and the gun. Guy is honestly shook and keeps asking how they knew it was him. Ex pulls Guy's ski mask off. Not a cop, but my brother was. He told me that this one time he took lunch at Popeyes while in uniform except for the hat. Once inside, the cashier started taking his order, then stopped halfway and turned to a coworker that just walked up. I don't remember exactly what was said, but basically the guy taking my brother's order asks the other guy if he took his weed. The other guy says yes, but he didn't smoke it all, and proceeded to hand him over the weed. The guy then says cool, not to worry, that he's got another stash in his car for emergencies like this. My brother then said that he just wanted to eat some lunch. The guys then realized he was a cop. One guy said something like not again. As my brother started arresting the cashier, he said that he thought my brother was the security guard. So my brother, just trying to make a joke out of it, says, "Oh, you smoke pot with your security guard?" To which the guy says, "No, just my manager and his buddy." But the real funny part was when he asked another employee there if the security guard was around, and the employee said they didn't have one and didn't know what that cashier was talking about. Friend's daughter and daughter's boyfriend get busted with a kilo of weed. Friend's daughter says, "Oh, we weren't going to smoke it. We were going to sell it." How the hell does someone that dumb manage to purchase a whole kilo? Edit. Okay peeps, thanks for the interest. As a former addict, I'm well aware of how the drug scene operates. It was a rhetorical question, since I considered most suppliers to be smart enough not to sell to someone this dumb. You can all stop trying to educate me now. Not a cop, student paramedic here. Once went to a family with a 2-year-old with difficulty breathing. Walked into the house to find 4 people and the parents smoking weed with the baby in the room. Baby was crying and coughing/spluttering. Couldn't believe my eyes. My mentor swiftly rang for police backup and we filled out some safeguarding paperwork concerns. Pretty sure they arrested them on scene for neglect. In court, defendant called the judge "Your Majesty" instead of "Your Honor." Honestly, I imagine this happens a fair amount just out of brain blank in an uncomfortable atmosphere. You stumble over a word and a similar common phrase comes out instead. Similar story, I work at a place that likes for us to say "my pleasure" when someone says "thank you." I hate saying it, but I'm trying to transition from saying "no problem" to the correct term. Yesterday I said "no pleasure" to a guest. Sometimes you just have to walk away. Edit. For God's sake, I don't work at Chick-fil-A. I work at Culver's. 10/10 would work at CFA, but I'm lesbian and my GF works at Culver's with me. Edit 2. I take a little nap and this shit blew up. I'm loving all the replies of similar blunders. Suspect was caught for drug possession, on the streets, and we were talking to the prosecutor to get a warrant for his house. Somehow, he managed to call his wife without our notice, and as we realized what happened, we heard him saying, "Honey, go take the fish out of the fridge." After we've got the warrant and searched his house, there was his fridge full of speed and the plate with fish which his wife had prepared for his return thrown in the trash. I'm no police officer, but I do remember watching an episode of Cops where this one guy was sagging so low and the officer asked him, "Do you have any weapons on you?" which he replied with no. The cop then proceeded to pull out an assault rifle out of his pants, and when he asked the suspect if it was his, the suspect swore he had no idea how it got there. Not a cop, but I know for sure this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen someone do. Several years ago, Some friends and I are hanging out when my friend brings along this new co-worker trying to get him out and about. Immediately we all knew something was off about this guy, but whatever. We were out until 3 in the morning before we call it a night. My friend is bringing me home and, just being an idiot, decides to swerve down the street before getting to my house. Well, we pass a cop car and the car hits its lights but had to turn around. By this point, I'm out the car when the cop is pulling up on us and this new guy makes a run for my front door. Cop jumps out his vehicle and demands all of us on the ground, just about waking up everyone in my neighborhood. Turns out, this dude had a warrant out for his arrest and he decided bolting out the car was the smartest move to make when a cop pulled up on us. There used to be a show called America's Dumbest Criminals. I remember one in particular where a guy was pulled over for driving erratically. He jumps into the passenger seat and pulls a large stuffed animal to the driver's seat. You can hear the cop laughing and saying WTF before getting out and approaching the car. The guy rolls the window down and the cop asks him why he was driving like that, and his response was, "Ask him. He was the one driving," while pointing at the stuffed animal. Not a police officer, but an ex of mine was out wandering in a wooded area of their town, drunk off their face. At some point, my ex, let's call him Twatwaffle, passes out in a field near a school and some apartments, and his friends just leave him there. Someone sees Twatwaffle laying in the field and calls the cops, worried that it's a dead body. Cop comes, nudges the body, and Twatwaffle starts to wake up. Blackout drunk, he leaps up all aggressive, like causing the cop to jump back and place his hand on his nightstick. Twatwaffle drunkenly screams, "What are you gonna do? Hit me with your stick," and charges the cop, who then attempts to swing the stick. He punches the cop, runs about 10 feet, then lays back down and falls asleep. Cop pepper sprays and arrests him. Twatwaffle remembers nothing. Detailed police report is how I know what happened. It 100% sounds like the stupid shit Twatwaffle would do frequently. He had to go to court, charged with assault on an officer. The officer insisted charges be dropped to drunk in public, since he wasn't entirely responsible for his actions because of how schmammed he was. After that, any time he told the story, it was about some asshole cop, when in reality, that cop saved his ass. Edit. Nightstick lol. I stopped someone who was in the area of a load of theft from motor vehicles. After a bit of questioning, I carried out a search and found numerous wallets, phones, etc. He claimed that all of the cards were his, all 13 different identities. To be fair, he stuck to his story. He carried it all the way to court, going not guilty. Okay then. Mr. Jones, you are under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mr. Fletcher, you are also under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Mrs. Rodriguez, you are under arrest for 12 counts of theft. Okay, so. Mr. Jones, you'll be serving a life sentence in San Quentin with no possibility of parole. Mr. Fletcher, you'll be serving on death row at San Quentin. Mrs. Rodriguez, you'll be serving 6 months in a minimum security women's prison. Mr. Ames, due to your military service, you'll be serving 5 years in Leavenworth. Mr. Mgum, you'll be remanded to ICE custody while awaiting deportation. Arrested a guy for shooting heroin in the parents' room of a shopping center. Walked in while he had the needle in his arm. We stare at each other for a bit, then he comes out with, "I'm a diabetic." I cuff him, leave my partner to do the search while I read caution and rights. Old mate is not diabetic, and we know this because he's got 87 prior convictions for use/possession/trafficking drugs. I go through the usual "you do not have to say or do anything" spiel, then say, "Do you understand these rights?" He's totally cooked on heroin at this point, and he just looks at me and goes, "You want to get dinner tonight?" It's not the worst response I've had to caution and rights though. Edit. I had no idea this would gain the amount of comments it did. There seems to be loads of questions in the replies, so if anyone has any for me, feel free to DM me and I'll answer them, for clarification. I'm in Australia, hence differences in the legal system.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.